Ladies and gentlemen, it's finally happening. In just 15 days at the time of recording, on the 25th of July 2023, is coming one of the most anticipated games of this year for me and many others, Remnant 2. I am Ocandersis, and in this video I'll go over everything you need to know before the game comes out. First, in case you don't know, Remnant from the Ashes, it's a Souls-like shooter type of game that released 2 years ago in 2019, and it was defined by most as Dark Souls with guns. And I know you might be thinking that's not going to work, but it did, pretty well I might add. When it came out, me and my friends, we had an absolute blast playing it. But it wasn't a flawless game. For example, one of the major complaints from the player base was tied to build variety that was largely restricted by the armor set bonus system. In short, every piece of armor was tied to a specific passive effect. The problem with that was that in the vastly majority of the case, equipping a full set of armor was the way to go, as a single but very strong effect was largely superior to a combination of 3 weak ones. Also, there weren't really many armor sets that were synergizing together well, both for effects and fashion. This meant mainly 2 things. A, by the end game everybody was running one of the top 3 strongest armors, and B, more importantly, in order to prioritize strength and efficiency, you had to sacrifice your personal fashion. You couldn't look the way you liked. Or you could, but you would be weaker. And for what we've seen so far, Remnant 2 is set to take every good and bad aspect that its predecessor had and improve upon it with a new twist. Starting from the procedural generating engine, in Remnant in fact there wasn't a linear path. As the protagonist, you had the ability to travel different worlds through what it was called a world stone. These were the game's checkpoints. And every time you were jumping into a new world for the first time, that world map, including enemies, dungeons and bosses, was randomly generated by a set of predefined world tiles. However, despite the fact that it served its purpose, the possible combinations were limited. This time around though, the developers themselves stated that they have improved and expanded this system up to the point that they are quite sure and confident that 2 playthroughs back to back will have nothing in common. To help traversing this new expanded world, they adopted what I like to call the Elden Ring approach. Stamina is no longer consumed during exploration, and it will only play a major role in combat. There is no more a single main storyline that links the journey between the worlds. Instead, there will be multiple possible storylines per world that have a chance to be generated by the engine when your character set foot in that biome for the first time. A new addition to this system is what it's called injectables, special encounters or mini dungeons that the player can generate inside each biome. A complete 3D minimap has been also added in the top right corner of the screen that will display clearly a handful of information like the available paths, the items around you, their specific position, along with displaying the gear score or difficulty level of that area. Gun mods from the first game are making a return, empowering your long gun and sidearm with different abilities, and will work pretty much in the same way. But something else called mutators has been also added in each of the 3 weapons categories, so this time around you will be able to modify even your melee weapon of choice. Mutators are set to replace the old armor set system, with the added benefits that you can slot your mutators freely like you would for weapon mods. This means that they are not tied to a specific piece of equipment, giving you more flexibility. Armor sets are now not only free from their bonus restrictions, but they are being expanded to 4 slots instead of the old 3 slots, giving you more choice on how you want your character to look like. They will as usually provide protections from various sources of damages and define your weight class, light, medium or heavy, which will directly impact your rolling speeds and iframes in pure Souls-like fashion. The jewelry system sees an expansion too, from 2 to now 4 ring slots and 1 necklace, further cementing the idea of more complex build variety and optimization. But the real star of the character building show is now the new Archetype system. This can seem quite daunting and confusing at first because there is a lot to take in, but in reality it's pretty straightforward. At the beginning of the game you will be able to choose between 5 different archetypes, each with their own specific playstyle. These are essentially classes that you can equip at any time on your character by slotting the corresponding archetype item into the archetype slot. Your initial choice in fact will not lock you into a specific playstyle for the entire game, and you will be able to find and collect the other 4 starting classes and more throughout the game progression. You will be able to fully experiment and freely swap around archetypes this time around, to find the class that fits you the most. Each archetype, along with a dedicated armor and a set of weapons, will give you access to 5 specific perks. Passive bonuses exclusive to that class that will empower different aspects of their specific playstyles. These are the damage perk, self-explanatory really, a team perk that will be focused on empowering your allies or your effectiveness when working with them, a utility perk which is a nice all-rounder to give you a boost that applies in many different situations, a relic perk related to your relic, more of that in a second, and the prime perk, which will be the defining perk of that archetype. You will also have access to 3 specific archetype skills, powerful active abilities that once used will be on cooldown before being readily available again. In addition to all of this, the more you play as a specific archetype, the more you will level up your archetype item. These have 10 levels each. From level 1 to 5, you will unlock all of your perks and skills, and from level 6 to level 10, each perk will receive a buff. And finally, each archetype will give you 1 unique archetype trait that will level up with your archetype level without the need to invest trait points in it, and once maxed out will be available to choose in the main trait page even if you don't have that specific archetype equipped at that time. This is everything that your chosen archetype will give you access to, but wait, there is more. At some point in the game you will gain the ability to equip 2 different archetypes at the same time, effectively combining 2 classes together and making your own personal class, gaining all their benefits combined together and access to all 6 skills. However, this is a good time to mention that only 2 skills will be equipable at any given time, but once again, you can freely swap between them when out of combat. The only other restriction will be the prime perk. As class-defining perk, you can have only one of these, so you will have to choose between the 2. In other words, the archetype slotted in the first slot will dictate your prime perk. The trait system from Remnant from the Ashes is also back, but even this one has been reworked like everything else. Traits don't max out at level 20, but now at level 10. This was a necessary reduction as now the level cap is around 85 trait points in total, in stark contrast with the 1000 level cap of the previous game. In Remnant from the Ashes you were able to max out every single trait after enough time playing, making your character practically unstoppable at normal difficulties. In addition to that, some of the traits were fundamentally too good to pass on, while other traits were always left behind. All of this is going to change in Remnant 2 as every single flat damage increase trait has been removed. This is in order to have players think before making important critical decisions on what they want in their build or what role they're going to fulfill when playing with their friends, instead of just going for the no-brainer choice. Every new character will start with the same 4 basic traits unlocked: Vigor for health points, Endurance for max stamina, Spirits to increase mod power generation, and Expertise, and new additional traits that reduce skill cooldown. As always, you can acquire trait points by killing enemies or finding trait books on the ground, while new traits can be unlocked by solving puzzles, killing bosses, or completing questlines. Before I mentioned a relic perk. Veterans of the first game will remember the Dragon Heart, which was your only relic in that game, and it was essentially the equivalent of the Estus Flask from Dark Souls, your main source of healing. But this time around, relics are not limited to that, and even if so far we've been only able to see the Dragon Heart as relic, it's safe to say that there will be many more to find in the game. In addition to that, each relic has 3 sub-slots in which you will be able to equip what are known as relic fragments. This will add special effects to each charge of your relic once used. You will find them as a reward in chests, and the game will automatically swap them with a more potent version once you come across it, while the old ones will be scrapped into relic dust that you can then use to roll for another relic fragment. On the weapons and armor front there will be a ton more to choose from. Armor cannot be upgraded unlike the first game though, taking a back seat when it comes to gear importance. It's essentially, again, the Elden Ring approach. Armor is more heavily focused on aesthetics rather than being a central pillar of your build, therefore allowing you more freedom when it comes to your favorite looking armor without compromising too much on the benefits. This also means that player skill will have a much greater impact on gameplay, which is good. Weapons, on the other hand, can be upgraded, and with the addition of mutators over the already existing weapon mods, It's now more important than ever to choose the right weapon for your build. Luckily, the game acknowledges that, and you will be able to choose between a good range of weapons directly at the beginning of the game. In War 13, the main hub area, you will find Brabus, previously the bandit boss in Remnant 1, now weapon trader that will supply you with many different types of weapons, for a price. Two specific weapons that I personally want to point out are the bow, seen in the trailers, which is a new weapon type that I personally can't wait to try, and the greatsword that looks to have an awesome moveset and a great look. You got it? Because it's a great sword. And I'm sorry, I had to put a bad joke in the script, I was getting bored. Final key point and new addition to the combat system is the grey health mechanic. Once taken damage in Remnant 2, half of it will be converted into grey health. Grey health will slowly regenerate itself if no additional damage is taken. Also, some perks or skill can affect the amount of hits you can take before grey health is depleted or how fast it can recover. With new worlds, new enemies, new mechanics, and everything you would expect from a worthy sequel, Remnant 2 is shaping out to be an absolute fantastic experience, and I cannot wait for it. When the time comes, I will be covering this game extensively, with guides, items, armor, weapons, locations, builds, and much more. So if you're interested in Remnant 2, I would suggest you to subscribe, ring the bell like a good hunter would, and keep an eye out on the channel for more Remnant 2 videos, because they are coming. Let me know in the comments what are your thoughts on Remnant 2. But for now, thank you very much for watching if you did, and as always, I'll see you all in the next video. Ocans out.